Generally, I don't get caught in Southern California traffic very often. Just somehow I managed to organize my life in such a way where I don't travel a whole heck of a lot, and I also don't travel during those awful bits of the day when traffic is guaranteed. 4th of July is that's a real crapshoot. It's real, crap doesn't mean like feces. It means like throwing dice, and so it's a real gamble. And then it just so normally I never go anywhere 4th of July weekend. But then a friend of mine got married up in Santa Barbara today. So then I had to go up there. But then I'd already booked a wedding in Laguna this afternoon. So I had to drive to Santa Barbara in the morning, and I had to drive back to Laguna in the afternoon. And I also got called upon to do some deity worship in Laguna. So I also had to be there early in the morning to do some deity worship, roll all the way up to the temple, roll all the way up to Santa Barbara, show my face at a wedding, and then go back down to Laguna to perform a wedding. And then we also decorated for the wedding, and we also cooked for it. And I'm here now. And so for me, it's a lot. I'm not super active, so there's a lot of stuff for me in one day. Anyway, it was a whole saga. There's other details, and it was a busy and eventful day. One of even last night I mopped the floor in Laguna, which I can't remember the last time I mopped the floor. And Jayadev mopped the temple floor, and I mopped the foyer floor. So I mean, when Jayadev and me swabbing the decks, it's been a minute. So that was all hands on deck. Anyway, at the second wedding in Laguna, they wrote their own vows. We have sort of a standard vow that we have people say called the Kama Stuti, which is in some ancient Vedic mantra that's said between husband and wife. Who has given his heart to whom? Love is the giver, love is the receiver. Love is given to an ocean of love. I receive you through love, oh love, this heart is yours. It sounds even better in Sanskrit. It sounds great in English, and it sounds even better in Sanskrit. But then they decided to write their own vows, which I think is great. And then they read them to each other in front of the audience. And the man, Ishan, Prabhupada disciple's son, Ishan said that, he said, I vow to do this, and I vow to do that, and this is my vow. He used that word vow over and over again. And I thought to myself that It's interesting, but we like to call ourselves in our own little internal speak. We like to call ourselves devotees, which actually is properly pronounced devotee, but whatever. We like to call ourselves devotees, which comes from voto, which means vow. And so a devotee is someone who has taken a vow. That's the literal meaning of the term. And vows, I think, automatically presume and are built on a premise of that it's going to be difficult to keep the vow. So, for example, if vows were easy and there was just no reason to break a vow and there was no likelihood that you might break a vow, then what would be the need of making some sort of formal commitment? The very act of making some kind of a formal commitment to keep a promise, to keep a vow, it's like a promise with a capital P. The very act of doing that is built on a foundational premise, an unstated one, perhaps, that there might be a reason for you to want to break that vow. There might be a reason for you to want to break that commitment. That's why you formalize it. That's why you speak it out. That's why you commit to it, usually to a witness, in some kind of a ritualized, formalized way. In other words, the very act of taking a vow means there's a good reason or a strong possibility that if you hadn't taken that vow, if you hadn't made that formal commitment, that you may at some point not follow through with that thing. And so a commitment really means that you do something when you don't want to. Which of course indicates there will be times in your life where you don't want to do something. This gets distilled down to a colloquialism. Pros play hurt. Pros play hurt. Oftentimes you'll see somebody after a big fight, they're like, oh, I had a terrible training camp, oh, I broke my finger, oh, I got a sprained ankle, or my knee, and they'll have some excuses, and then not every time, but oftentimes somebody else, maybe the person they competed against, they'll say, yeah, I'm always injured too. Yeah, I'm injured and I prevailed. Or I'm always working off of injuries too. Who's not working off of injuries? Pros play hurt. And so commitments mean you do it when you don't want to, or when there's a reason not to do it, you still do the right thing. Otherwise, you just don't say anything. You just do something for as long as you want to do it. Who bothers saying to somebody, hey, I'll keep doing this as long as I feel like it? You don't bother saying that to people. I'll keep doing this until I change my mind. I'll keep doing this until it doesn't feel right anymore. I'll keep doing this until something better comes along. Nobody bothers to say that. That's just assumed. That's the default position. When you make a commitment, it means even if something better does come along, or I don't feel like doing this, or this is difficult, or it becomes troublesome, or it becomes onerous, I'll keep on keeping on. I'll dig in. I'll stay the course. I actually think the ability to make and keep promises is a key factor in building self-trust, self-esteem, the trust of others in you. And I think it's a core ingredient of integrity. Integrity, of course. What is integrity? Ishwar?
It's to live by the values.
It's to live up to your values. To be integrated, to be whole, like integer. The wholeness is that there is no gap between your values and your actions. And so integrity is to live your values. Thank you. I think in a lot of ways that means commitment. A commitment to live according to your values. The ability to have values and then stay chaste and faithful to them. That is commitment, but that's also integrity. I can have an ideal, and then I can commit to that ideal, and I can live up to my commitment to that ideal. Things are always fun and new and sexy for 5 minutes or so. Like my friend Matt just got into jiu-jitsu. And he's like, I shave my head, I'm going to train every day. I'm down for life. I'm in this. Like every white belt, whoever started a martial art. But you know, there's a long road between the white belt and the black belt. And it's a war of attrition. And it's slow and steady wins the race. So, I had a busy day. And people were like, oh, you're probably not going to come to Long Beach tonight. I said, no, of course I'm going to come to Long Beach tonight. And I was so wasted after marriage number 2, I crashed out and took a nap. Which, you know, I mean, siestas are a feature of every gentleman's life. But, I'm no gentleman, and so I don't often siesta in the afternoon between programs. But I had to crash out for about an hour and a half just to get my sea legs under me again and make it over here. And my wife was joking because I'm always like, yeah, of course, no problem. Yeah, sure, I'll be at all 3 programs. No sweat. Oh, it's no big deal. We'll just drive up to Santa Barbara for 3 hours and drive back down for 3 hours to do another wedding, to drive back up to Long Beach and drive back down again. Yeah, why not? I'm like 51. Why wouldn't I do that? But for me, my commitment that I was going to come up here tonight or to do both weddings wasn't based on the idea that it was going to be easy or that I wasn't going to suffer. You know when you get so tired and your body gets so wrecked, maybe from sitting in a car or just running around or whatever, but your core starts to give way? Like your core, like your, whatever that is, that comprise your core, some abdominal muscles, your psoas, your hip flexors, and your glutes, and, your serratus anterior, your back, and your QL. I guess that's those kind of muscles, they all just kind of start to give way. And maybe you're trying to I don't know, I'm just thinking about it now out loud, but if you're super short, then maybe washing your hands in the sink is no big deal. But if I'm 6 feet tall, a little bit over 6 feet tall, and so when I'm washing my hands in the sink, I'm kind of tilted. I have to tilt to wash my hands in the sink. Does that make sense? And so there's a little bit of strain on my lower back, which is normally practically imperceptible unless I have a back injury. in which case I have to do like a whole sumo squat type deal to wash my hands. And then, or when I'm just so wrecked that my basic posture and stability is going, and just the act of washing my hands is onerous and difficult and painful because I'm just, it's kind of like almost like central nervous system fatigue. My core just starts to give out from exhaustion. You guys are kind of young. You may not know what I'm talking about. Maybe it's like an old man's gig. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
I mean, now that you say it like that, I totally understand that that's happened to me. Now, I guess now I'm a man.
I'm like saying what you've always felt, but just never put to words, right? I'm working through it myself. It was that bad. It was that bad. I was like washing my hands, and I had to put my knees against the sink to stabilize myself, because even the act of a sumo squat was just like too much work. So I just sort of leaned into the sink, which I would normally never do. Never lean on a sink or something like that. That would be like, I'd rather do like 1,000 squats and rest my knee on a sink somewhere. Anyway, it wasn't that I thought it was going to be easy and I just commit to stuff because I'm overly optimistic. It was what my wife, what she cast it as. Oh, you're just always, my nagging wife. Because she's known for being a negative, Nancy, nagger type personality. Anyway, so my wife was joking with me. You always commit to these things. She was talking to Nandini about it or something like that. And that wasn't actually at all my reality. My reality was just simply that I'm committed to the program here, and so I have to do it. I remember one time, this was 2001, 2002, so whatever that is. A couple decades ago and a bit. And I was doing some service in the kitchen at the temple in Laguna Beach. And there was like a bit of a soft mutiny going on. It happens in temple environments. You got a bunch of young, stupid, immature, lusty, foolish, untrained, uncommitted people who are entering into our tradition. But the result is they have what's called komala shraddha. They have soft faith, pliable faith. And they don't have deep conviction because they're children. To be an immature, foolish child, if you're a child, is no problem. I mean, if you're 18 and that's the way you are, you're normal. You're normal. I always start to worry about people who are like, I'm all in. I'm committed for life to this, but I've known them for a week or something like that. That always concerns me. And maybe it indicates some narcissistic personality traits where they jump into something and jump out of something, a bit of a dabbler thing, maybe some self-delusion, a need for validation. It indicates to me a lack of personal structural integrity. And usually those people are here today and gone tomorrow. They're quick, they're easy in, easy out. You must have all met people like that, right? You may be people like that, I don't know. But if you are, age is a cure. Age helps. But not just time by itself. You got to do things right. And then you can grow and become much more formidable and much more stable over time. But I prefer people who I have some doubts. I'm checking it out. I'm interested. We'll see where this goes. I prefer that because it indicates to me that they're not just all over the place and a big sloppy mess. Are you following this? Does that make sense? Anyway, so we had this sort of soft mutiny going on, or not even really a soft, like more like a soft exodus or something like that. But it just, maybe springtime comes around and the mooses are doing their mating calls, and a bunch of brahmacharis put out kirtan tapes, and indicating that, but people start thinking, I might need to be moving on. I might need to be doing something else. People get agitated like this, like they need to maybe make a move. They've been around the temple for 6 months or something like that, or a year, and they got to make a move, and they're getting jittery, and like they got the shakes, and they got to bust out and go do something, and then they start talking to each other, and pretty soon you've got this whole smorgasbord of young, impressionable, playing off of each other, doubting Thomases, and they want to all bounce. You follow? And I remember saying to them, just kind of, we're washing dishes, or I'm cooking and they're cleaning, whatever it was. And I remember saying, well, I'm not going anywhere. It's like, oh, if we all leave, like, who's even going to be here? And I'm like, I'm going to be here. I'm not going anywhere. And that, just very straightforward, and it's true. I'm 20 some odd years later, I'm still doing the same thing. And it was 15 years before that I was doing the same thing, and I'm in 3.5 decades at this point, before I was even an adult. Been doing the same thing 7 days a week, 365, day in and day out. Same vows, same commitment, same japa, same principles I live by. I got married, had 6 kids, kept the same principles. I just said plainly, I'm going to be here. And several of the people, it really affected them. And they hung for another 5 or 10 years. 5 or 10 months turned into 5 or 10 years. And I remember them telling me, we remember that day when we weren't sure if we were going to stay or go. And you said, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. And that, me being that anchor point, and me being that pillar, and me having that conviction, and me making that commitment, and them seeing me making that commitment, it did something to them, and it enabled them to anchor themselves to me and to that commitment, and they themselves became committed. You follow? One of those voices is a temple president now, decades later. He's now a leader. Devotee means that you have taken a vow, which is the essence of integrity, which means you've made and you keep commitments, which is the key to life. The ability to choose good commitments to make, then to make them, and then to keep them. Life's actually simple in that way. What you make a promise, you keep it. That's your life. You make a series of promises, and then you spend the rest of your life keeping them. That's a good life. That's a life well spent. You need to make good promises. You need to figure out what good promises look like. You need to make them. And if you're the kind of person who's here today and gone tomorrow and makes a promise and then breaks it and jumps back in and jumps back out, it's not good. There's no there. There's nothing there. Nothing to anchor yourself to. Nothing to anchor yourself to, because you're all over the place. What to speak of somebody else being able to find some strength in you? It's a house of cards. It's an illusion. There's no substance to it. If you can't keep commitments, you got to be careful when you make commitments, because you got to keep them. And if you accustom yourself to moving on from commitment to commitment, and dropping the ball and being like, well, I feel differently now, and I've changed my mind now, and this and that, and that's so easy for you, then you'll be doing that forever. You'll be dabbling in the name of committing. Anybody who's intelligent will stay away from you. And you won't even be able to trust yourself, because how are you going to trust yourself if you're always jumping around? And everybody's got an excuse for why they don't do what they say they're going to do. But the end result is you don't trust that person. They can't keep a commitment. Like you're a captain in the military. Somebody's like that. You would never put them in charge of something that's vital. You'd never want them in a linchpin position. In fact, you as a leader with guns, you in tanks, in charge of a cavalry unit, so you're a leader with tanks. You look for people that, right? At least in the military or something like that, there's a whole structure and people are replaceable cogs and there's a machine that moves forward and the machine itself becomes strong. When you're dealing with a smaller group, a newer group, a fledgling group, then it's really the man next to you. It's not just people are just replaceable and you can swap out one cog for another. The group's too small, you're trying to get off the ground, you really do need to depend on each other. So anyway, I ran around like a psycho today. I overcommitted, but I didn't. I kept the commitments. The guy who I went to his wedding up in Santa Barbara, I've known since he was born. Couldn't miss that one. I literally went there for 15 minutes. I got up there at 11:23. And I walked out at 12:03. So I mean, technically I was there for 40 minutes, but the wedding didn't start until 11:55 or maybe 11:50. So I was actually there at the wedding for about 15 minutes. And it was 3 hours up and 3 hours down. I made it in 2.5 because I'm a good driver, even in traffic. But it was still over 5 hours of driving to be there for 15 minutes of a wedding. And I was expecting that. I'm not thinking, oh, I shouldn't have gone. That was exactly the gig. I went up there, offered my respects, embraced some people, let people see my face, gave them my blessings, showed my support, let them know I cared about them enough to drive 5 hours to be there for 15 minutes of their wedding. And I wouldn't have booked the other wedding had I known, but they made their wedding after I'd already booked the other one. The other one were people I convinced to get married. And so I can't abandon them. I'm the one who convinced them to get married. So I'm committed to them. I've known this person for life, and then I come here every week. So there were 3 solid commitments I have in my life, 2 people that are important to me, that I encourage people to get married and make commitments to each other. That's just a part of who I am. It's a part of my value system. It's part of what I do when I interact with people. I encourage them to make those kind of commitments to one another and to legitimize their romantic relationships. And somebody I've known for life, before I became a devotee, just as a principle of the kind of person I am and the kind of person my parents raised me to be, relationships mean something to me. So I had to go up there and show up. And then we started doing this 10 years ago, and so I come every week. So, I'm going to put it all together now and say it for like the 6th time, but I'm going to really do my best to put it all together smoothly now. The essence of a well-lived life is that you make a series of commitments and then spend your life keeping them. The ability to keep commitments is actually exactly tantamount and equal to integrity. It is what makes you trustworthy, not only to others, but to yourself. Everyone's got a bunch of excuses, but none of them work. If you're the kind of person who bounces on their commitments, you can't be trusted. Commitments means you do it even when you don't want to. Be careful when you make commitments. And a well-spent life, again, is simply figuring out what commitments are worth making, then making them, and then keeping them. If you do that, people will anchor themselves to you because you are stable, because you're a pillar, because that ability to be committed is attractive and inspirational. You'll do good for yourself and you'll do good for others. And when you make commitments to the deity, you become a devotee. But the same principle that leads to a good life, when then you apply that same idea to a life with God, then you have a devotee. A person who practices that good life we just described in relationship to divinity. Because that's what life consists of, then a life with divinity also consists of the same thing, and you just include divinity in your commitments. Did you guys follow that? That was a super smooth pivot that you guys are kind of putting it all together. Did you guys catch it? That little moment there? It's a principle of life, and it became the exact same principle of what it means to be a devotee, which is what I started with. Did you guys catch that? Okay. And I got a verse. Yetu sarvani karmani mayi sanyasya matpadaha Yetu sarvani karmani, but those who, all of their acts, mayi sanyasya matpadaha, but to those who all of their acts, they surrender them to me, they give them to me, and they hold me as the highest object. Matpadaha mayi sanyasya. Mayi means they renounce them to me, they give them to me. Sannyas usually means renunciation in Sanskrit. It specifically refers to someone who's taken a form of vow of celibacy. But the word sannyas, that's a sannyasi. But the word sannyas is sun, ni, and us. It means to place something down completely. And it carries with the idea of offering something. Mayi sannyasya, they offered everything to me. Sarva karmani, all their acts, their whole life, they've offered to me. Matpadaha, they hold me as the highest object. They're dedicated to me. I am the most important thing to them. Matpadaha means I am their highest object. Ananyenaiva yogena, and with undeviating yoga. Can you guys hear it? Like the ananyenaiva yogena, with undeviating yoga. Anya means other. Ananya is the opposite, no other. Ananyenaiva yogena, with undeviating yoga, with yoga that's not directed towards anything else, because matpadaha, I am the highest object for them, and therefore mayi sanyasya sarva karmani, they've surrendered all of their acts to me. You guys, it fits, doesn't it? I just thought of this on the way in the room, and then I thought of this verse when I sat down. But now I'm reading it, and I'm thinking, wow, this really fits well. This really fits like a glove. Mam dhyayanta upasate. They meditate on me and thereby worship me through their thoughts. So there's a cognitive and a behavioral aspect. All of their works, sarva karmani, all their works, mayi sannyasa, they're given to me. Why? Because matpadaha, because I am the highest object for them. There's a cognitive behavioral element there. Ananyenaiva yogena, with undeviating yoga, dhyayanta upasate, they worship me by thinking about me. And so there's another sort of cognitive behavioral element. Yoga implies behavior, and dhyan implies meditation. So there's kind of two lines. Each one of them has a cognitive and behavioral element. It's all dedicated very, very strongly towards Krishna. Mam dhyayanta, they meditate on me. Mat paraha, me is the highest object. Mayi sannyasa, everything given to me. Krishna indicates himself personally as the object of that devotee's vow and commitment. Here's where we add something. Tesham, for them. Aham samudharta mrityu samsara sagarat. For them I am the uplifter from the ocean of death. Mrityu samsara sagarat, from the ocean of death. Aham samudharta, I am the uplifter, or perhaps a better word in English to communicate. Samudharta literally means I'm the one who picks them up and uplifts them. We would say in English, I am their Savior. I save them. I'm their Savior. Aham samudharta, I am their Savior from the ocean of death. Death and rebirth, the cycle of karma. This is very interesting because it indicates that our commitment is attractive not only to other people who might anchor themselves to us, but it's also attractive to Krishna, who, because of our commitment, is empowered to be in a position to help us. It's an unusual way to think about things, that why would God need to be empowered by us or inspired by us to help us? It's an interesting philosophical question. Who wants to answer it? And do you guys understand the problem? There's a massive gaping problem with saying that Krishna is inspired by us and attracted to us, and then he saves us as a result of us doing this thing. It creates there's a huge, massive question that's created by what I just said. Does anybody know what the question is? What's the question? Let's problematize this. What's the problem with what I just said about Krishna? Madhuri. God's love seems transactional. Does anybody want? You nailed it. It's a little too sutra-like for my taste. Does anybody want to expand on what she just said, which is the correct answer? God's love, therefore, would be transactional.
God only gives us love in return for our love.
Okay, that would be the transactional. You just simply restated what she said. I want you to flesh out what she said and not merely restate it. What does that mean? God's love is transactional. And let me help you, because you guys seem to be floundering ever so slightly. What does that say about Krishna? That he's transactional? Yeah, no duh, she just said that. What does that say about Krishna? All right, now we got some skin in the game? All right. Ishwar.
It means that because his love's conditional, that he won't help those or...
Okay, that's literally just restating what she said. It's a sexier version than what Rudy came up with. It means that his love will only be there for you if you do what he wants you to do, because it's transactional. He's only gives back if you do something first, because it's transactional. And I'm just saying the same thing over and over again in different language, but I'm not actually fleshing it out and tracing down what that says about God. Yes.
It means that Krishna is controlled by our love.
All right. Now there's a Krishna's not only is it transactional, but now it indicates Krishna may be controlled by love. You're skipping what they said, and you remember me saying Krishna's attracted and empowered by. He's attracted to it, just like we're attracted to someone who's a pillar. Krishna's attracted to us, and that would indicate that Krishna is weak. Right? That's what you're saying. Krishna's weak because he's attracted to us, and now our acts modify Krishna, and that would seem to be a deficiency because we believe that God's all-powerful. Just as a transactional deity would be a problem because it means God's not all good. Could an all-powerful deity be transactional? Yes. Could an all-good deity be transactional? No. Is transactional love the deepest kind of love you can think of? It is not, is it? It is not. Therefore, what Madhuri said, and it seems like the love is transactional, is exactly equivalent to saying God is not all good. Do you see it now? So the statements I made are problematic precisely because they indicate that God is not all good because he's transactional. He'll only do for you if you do for him. But couldn't an all-powerful deity just help everybody? Why doesn't God just help everybody? Why does God only help the people who come to him in a particular way and do a bunch of stuff for him? Wouldn't that mean that he's not all good? Alternatively, you said Krishna's attracted to this, and he becomes inspired by it. Wouldn't that indicate a weakness or a lack of fullness in God? And God's dependent on you? Wouldn't that indicate God's not all powerful? And so in these simple statements, what all have you missed? What all of you missed was that these statements fleshed out and turned into philosophical premises. If you accept these statements, you're accepting that God is not all good and not all powerful. Does everybody see this now? Is it a problem to see that God is not all good and not all powerful? Sure. How could you surrender fully to a deity who couldn't protect you? God might be a nice guy, but I can't actually give my life to him because he can't help me. I'm not all powerful. Why would I want to give my life to somebody who's not all good? These are serious problems. So now, the resolution to the problems I created, now that we know what the problems are, is something which preserves God's goodness and God's power. Right? Now that we problematize it, let's hear some resolutions. Yes?
He's vulnerable because you need to be vulnerable to love somebody, be loved back.
Love means vulnerable, therefore an all-good deity would be capable of love, and a deity capable of love would also have to be capable of relativity, and an idea that God was only absolute and not relative would be a robot for God, because love by its very existence involves vulnerability, and therefore a deity that was capable of feeling and being affected by another is superior and more powerful than a deity who is not, because that deity has the power to love. That's an excellent answer. It's adjacent. It's not the answer, in my humble opinion. It's close, and I think it would pass muster in a pinch. There's an even better answer. Yes?
Krishna is all loving, so he gives us free will to turn to him.
Okay? A little too sutra-like for my taste. Do we have to go through another process like I went through with Madhuri, or can you flesh out your own answer?
Just like that.
Having good intuition is part of it. But good intuition without the ability to finish the move is insufficient. It's like starting a sentence but not being able to finish it. You follow? It's good. And most of us are in that boat where we have some good intuition, but we haven't mastered the concepts. And therefore, as we try to really articulate them, we fail. And we end up speaking in half-formed thoughts, hoping the other person gets what we're trying to say, and we're not forced to actually systematically present something so that any intelligent person would be able to understand what we said. In many ways, we depend on the people we're speaking to being more intelligent than we are, because they have to complete our poor thoughts that are good, but they have to be better than us because they can finish them. Which, of course, only works if you're answering questions for your teacher who already knows the answer. It'll never work when you're the teacher. You follow? You want to go again? And let me help you. What's the challenge? What's at stake? How do I make the point I just made in such a way that it resolves the problem because I know what's at stake? Go ahead.
God is all good because He wants to give us free will.
God's all good because He wants to give us free will.
Sorry.
God's all good, and therefore He created the best of all possible worlds. Because an all-good God would want to create the best of all possible worlds, and an all-powerful God could create the best of all possible worlds. And the best of all possible worlds includes love, and therefore, but love requires free will, and therefore an all-good, all-powerful deity would create the best of all possible worlds, which is a world with the possibility of love, but which also necessitates free will, and therefore God gave us free will. And free will means God can't force us back to heaven. And therefore we have to open the door. And that doesn't become an indication of God's weakness or any kind of impoverished quality on the part of God. It's just the result of creating the best of all possible worlds with the possibility of love, therefore with free will, and therefore we are actually an agent. We are a moral agent in the world. We make choices, and those choices affect God's ability to help us. He can't force us in like a vampire has to wait to be invited in before they can come to your home. Similarly, God has to wait to be invited in. And the acts mentioned in the beginning of the 2 verses I'm reading from create a situation where Krishna can then do his part and reciprocate with us. That's what you want to say. And that's how you say it. You were doing good. You were getting there. You were moving in the right direction. What's on challenge? All good and all powerful. How is it that an all good and all powerful deity would create a world with free will where we had to invite him in? And that's the answer. Because love requires free will, and a world with love is better than a world without love, and therefore an all good and all powerful God would create a world with love. Which really means ceding some of his power. Which actually is another great thing an all-good deity would give. And even all power is the power to do whatever you want. And sometimes you can define evil as the inability to do the right thing. Therefore, an all-powerful being would automatically be all good. And therefore, within all power is goodness. And amazingly, an all-powerful deity, which then can do anything, would also give away some of that power. And that's the most powerful act. And we are therefore a real agent in the world, and our free will is a constituent factor of reality. And Krishna is therefore responsive and never mitigates that free will. And when we turn towards divinity, that opens a door. And a deity that couldn't become inspired and couldn't become better and couldn't grow would actually not be all perfect either. And so an all perfect deity would have to be infinite to begin with and capable of constant growth. And because we are a real factor in reality, our reciprocation, our responses to that deity would also create growth for divinity. Why not? These types of thoughts are dangerous because they put a lot of weight on our shoulders. In fact, when I married these people today, I explained this thing about commitment to them, and I said, I'm now placing the weight of centuries of your predecessors who stayed married through thick and thin, through life, on your shoulders. You are the current generation who now carries that commitment for the rest of your life. And all those people who failed to keep that commitment in your upline, you're going to repair their mistakes by your act of keeping your commitment as well. And therefore, your predecessors who failed to stay committed, you will fix their mistake and bless them And those of your predecessors who did keep their commitment, you will honor them by keeping the commitment yourself. And now that weight rests squarely on your shoulders for the rest of your life. Heavy, right? I was joking and kind of being a bit of an MC, but then I dropped into this at a certain point and the room was just silent. And I stopped talking to everybody and I looked right at the people and I talked to them, and there was a weight. There was a weightiness in the air. It was palpable. Think about the weight on our shoulders now. Not only do our fellow devotees depend on us to be pillars who don't break our commitment so they can stay inspired, but even Krishna is waiting on our commitment. Think about the weight that puts on your shoulders. And think about the wonderful doors it opens to what's possible, to what an amazing life you can lead, to how by keeping your commitments you can just have an amazing life. Bhavami nachirat partha mai aveshita chetasam. For those people whose minds are absorbed in me, I swiftly, very quickly become the liberator from birth and death. Thank you very much, IGTV. Any feedback?